The hardworking truck driver was focused on his job, not on luck. But when he stood up for a bullied parking lot worker, everything changed unexpectedly for him. A hidden secret, a strange reward, and a new beginning knocked on his door. A second chance he didn't expect suddenly appeared in his life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Revealed Stories. Today, I am excited to share a new, captivating story with you. Let's begin the tale. George was a truck driver whose life was measured not in minutes, but in miles. He spent days and even weeks on the road, transporting everything imaginable. Gas stations, greasy food, and sleeping in the truck cabin. That was his world. Helen waited at home. Her voice on the phone kept his sanity. George's life was not wealthy, but it was his own. However, something stopped feeling right. Perhaps it was the body aches or the empty roads. Pulling into the parking lot, George noticed a newcomer, Jack, a skinny guy struggling with a pile of tires. His Metallica t-shirt was soaked with sweat. George frowned. He knew those guys. Lots of show and no substance. George kept his distance, but couldn't forget about Helen's health, which was deteriorating. Unpaid medical bills weighed on him like a heavy burden. One afternoon, there was a flat tire on the bulldozer outside. The other guys turned away, chuckling. George intervened. His instructions were short and sharp. He showed Jack what was hard to explain in words, using his hands. George, recalling the tricks he had learned over the years in the cab, let his thoughts wander. Helping the guy seemed right, even if it crossed an unspoken line. The younger generation was so disrespectful. Were they simply a product of a changing world, or was work ethic becoming a forgotten art? Helen said he worried too much, but care was all he had left as the miles stretched between them. Retirement was approaching, bringing more time for worries, for pondering how Helen's days passed without him on the road. Suddenly, the CB radio crackled. A voice sounded. "Are there any good guys on this stretch of asphalt?" George hesitated, then took the microphone. His voice sounded hoarse over the radio waves. "This is Eastwood." "Fine, as usual." The air filled with familiar chatter. Complaints about traffic, boasting about speed. Suddenly, a young voice interrupted with a burst of laughter. "Hey, old man, check out this cool shortcut. Not sure your truck can keep up." George clenched his jaw. He didn't like not only the risky boasting, but also the dismissive old man, which hurt him deeply. He grabbed the microphone again, his voice sharp. "Nowadays," he grumbled, "we respected the road and our machines. Shortcuts lead to breakdowns, and breakdowns lead to delays and hungry mouths." A quiet chuckle came over the radio. "Relax, old man," a voice sounded. "The new trucks can handle any difficulties. There's no time for old caution." George's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He saw young people, fascinated by phones rather than instruments, treating trucks like toys. "One day," George warned with a rumble in his voice, "this carelessness will catch up with you, and no fancy machines will save you." Silence hung heavy in the air. Then another voice, old and with a hint of humor, said, "He's not wrong, guys. Some lessons are learned only through mistakes." George did not feel satisfaction. Not everyone had forgotten the old ways and the driver's silent respect for the vehicle, but something had clearly changed. Inhaling the smell of diesel fuel, George returned to the yard. Seeing Jack struggling with a bolt, George couldn't resist. He couldn't walk by without helping. A smile slightly touched his lips. Old habits died slowly. He stepped forward, ready to help Jack with another repair. George did not know that keen eyes were watching from the dusty office window. It was William Ridgway, a wealthy owner accustomed to boardrooms, not truck yards. William saw something unexpected. It was not just an employee helping a yard worker. It was something rare. Honesty and decency amidst the dirt. George did not expect to see luxurious offices, but here he was, in work boots, scratching the expensive carpet. The polished wooden desk seemed endless. William Ridgway was different from what George had imagined. George felt uncomfortable. He wasn't used to praise. The child just reminded me of myself, he muttered, without looking away. Looking at his battered hands, William realized he was facing hardships. He continued cautiously talking about medical bills and other matters. "I want to offer help," said William. George was proud of himself. Years on the road taught him to rely only on himself. "I appreciate that," George managed to say. "But I'll manage." William leaned forward, a slight smile appearing on his lips. "This is not charity, George, but an investment. Potential is being wasted here." He pointed to the window overlooking the busy freight yard. "I heard you're close to retirement. I propose to cover all medical expenses and allow you to gradually reduce your workload." He paused to emphasize the effect. "In return, I suggest you use your experience elsewhere." George stared at the words, letting them settle in his mind. A dream of escape from the endless highway, but at what cost? Something troubled him deep inside, an inner feeling that there was more to William Ridgway than it seemed. "No answer is needed now," William said, sensing doubts. "The offer stands, but no, I saw the fire in your eyes. When you fixed that complicated punctured tire, knowledge worth more than any salary." The next day, William called George back. This time, the formality was gone, replaced by tense energy. "It's time to stop beating around the bush," William began, not looking away. "That farm worker is my son. Jack was sent here to understand the value of money, to earn it through hard work," William said. "You showed him more than I could." A faint vulnerability sounded in William's voice. He paused. George suddenly understood everything. George noticed how the other workers neglected Jack, constantly reminding him that he was not from their environment. Everything came together into a single picture. William's big offer was not just help for George. It was a lesson from a rich father to his son about hard work and humility. After a few weeks, all debts were paid off. Helen returned from the hospital, and the anxious wrinkles disappeared from her face. The financial burden of medical bills vanished, giving way to a new peace. George found himself next to his old truck. The truck was no longer a salvation but had turned into a project. Next to it, Jack worked with amazing concentration. Helen noticed changes in the yard. The days of restless phone calls were gone. Now the evenings were filled with shared laughter and simple joys that George had almost forgotten. Jack began teaching George. "What shall we teach this old beast today?" George smiled and replied, "Let's start with the basics." It was a different kind of work, but it felt right. Perhaps for the first time, luck and right actions could coexist in this dusty, oil-soaked world. George's days took on a new rhythm. without endless roads. Instead of highways, there was the constant clinking of tools and the hum of engines coming to life. He worked alongside Jack, a quiet, cozy atmosphere prevailing between them. For Helen, there were now walks through quiet fields, the chirping of crickets, replacing the roar of the old truck. A long-awaited change in life. Jack was improving. Instead of resentment, he was full of determination to learn, and that made George proud. The boy absorbed knowledge like a sponge. He asked questions not only about mechanics, but also about life on the road, about the unnoticed corners of the country, and the strange friendship among truck drivers. "Have you ever felt lonely on the road?" Jack asked one day. George smiled and began to tell an incredible story about a night with a storm and a hitchhiker. This woman was in a wet wedding dress. She had run away from her own wedding, and the angry groom was chasing her. That's how the crazy chase through the small town began. A priest with a shotgun took part in the chase, and George somehow managed to get her there on time. The story ended with a sparkle in George's eyes and a surprised smile from Jack. Jack smirked. "Come on, Dad. There can't be a priest with a shotgun." The other workers on the site didn't know what to think about George's story. Some were curious, while others were secretly annoyed. Bulldozer operator Barnes became less confident and watched George closely. Experienced drivers respected George. They understood that respect must be earned through hard work, not a fancy machine or boasting. One hot summer day, a sleek, black car arrived at the site. William Ridgway stepped out, looking older, but with a determined gaze. A smile appeared on William's face when he saw Jack, covered in dust and sweat after work. Working next to George, covered in grease and smiling, he immediately understood what was happening. The Ridgways had invited George and Helen to their villa on the island. It seemed like a transition to another world, completely different from the roadside cafes and diners George usually visited. The first days were filled with silent, awkward tension. The endless view of the ocean, the silent staff quietly taking care of them. It was like a whole life far from what George knew. Helen seemed to quickly get used to the new life. She enjoyed morning swims and the scent of flowers in the garden. George, however, felt uneasy and out of place. The large, quiet house constantly made him feel guilty for being there. He was used to roadside cafes and highways, not luxurious mansions. Suddenly, the expensive Jeep by the pool wouldn't start. George recognized something familiar in the engine, and after a few hours was covered in grease, trying to fix it. William Ridgway watched from the house, a slight smile on his face. When George finally started the Jeep, it seemed he had repaired a part of himself as well. In the evening, William approached George. The sun was setting, painting the cliff top in warm tones, creating a special atmosphere. He quietly said with a tone of respect in his voice, something that can't be bought or taught, "You have a gift in shades of gold." Then followed a pause and a gentle offer. "Would you be interested in helping with the cars, doing various small tasks around the estate? Nothing complicated, just to keep your hands busy." George felt mixed emotions. This was not the life he had imagined, but the chance to feel needed and work with his hands seemed important. It was a bridge a way to find balance between the endless highway and forced idleness. The return to the mainland was quiet, Helen's eyes shining with happiness. It was a glimpse of her former self, finally resurfacing. George was more reserved, getting used to the new routine in the freight yard. Everything seemed a little different. The bulldozer remained just as arrogant, but the other young drivers became friendlier and seemed to respect George more. Although they did not say it aloud, rumors about Jack had reached the yard. His days as a yard assistant were behind him. George was preparing Jack for the office role, getting him ready to one day lead the business. That look appeared when the roar of a truck engine echoed beyond the warehouse walls. George understood that call of oil and machinery that had penetrated the soul. The question remained, what was more important to Jack, the office or the workshop? Only time would show which path was meant for him. Beyond the horizon stretched a fiery sunset, a farewell to yet another day, lived with new meaning and purpose. Sometimes fate and good intentions intertwined the most unexpected paths. George knew this as surely as he knew the workings of an engine. He was confident. He was in his place, where he was meant to be. And this brought him deep satisfaction. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel to see more tales. Tell us what you thought of this story. Leave a comment and share your thoughts with others. What one word would you use to describe your feelings? Share in the comments right now. We really want to know your opinion and impressions of the video. While you're here, be sure to watch the video currently displayed on your screen. It is full of interesting and useful content. Thank you for being with us. See you again in the next videos and new interesting discussions. We look forward to seeing you again.